Hello, and welcome to Creepycore and Folklore, the show about creatures, encounters, old tales, and myths. I'm your host, Iona Wayland, a dark fantasy author, mental health professional, and overall curious person. I want to join other spooky souls and hear about these unusual stories. Hello, spooky soul. I'm excited to introduce you to author, narrator, voice actor, podcaster, and death doula, Leah Noel. Welcome, Leah. I'm honored you're here. Thanks for speaking with me and the fellow spooky soul who's listening. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Thank you so much for having me, Iona. My name is Leah Noel. I'm a novelist of 2 books, and I turned my second novel into an audio drama, and I'm the producer and voice actor for that. I'm also a death doula, and I recently opened my astrology practice.
Ooh.
So I'm excited to talk with you. I know we have a lot in common.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do. Thank you for having me this morning.
Of course. Something that I wanted to have you here on the podcast about, amongst other things, are ghostly encounters you've had. So you were telling me a bit about opening yourself up to spiritual encounters or spirit encounters, and I was wondering if you'd like to share about that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and because you and I really connected over your Carson experience, which I've been following so closely, and it's just the way you've entered in with that spirit is so beautiful.
It's so
and
interesting. Also, here they are.
Hi.
They're always like
Hi.
with me at my desk.
Oh, hi, Carson. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And so, yeah, that's how you and I connected was I had a dowsing rod experience as well. And that was my second experience, I would say. So I can go into that if you'd like.
Yeah, sure.
So, because I really know how it feels to have those things move in your hands and you are not doing it.
You're just like a conduit, basically. And it's funny because I'll get these messages that are like, you're moving them. And it's like, okay, I am, because that's how it's set up, like to pick up on micro movements, but I'm also definitely not. Like, I'm not like thinking about what answers, like I'm allowing myself to kind of be like used for communication, or the rods to be moved for communication.
Right. Yeah. I totally know what you mean. And it's hard to explain. Like you feel it.
Yes,
When you
you
feel it
feel it.
yourself, you know. So my dowsing rod experience, I had just moved up to where I live now, which is closer to family. And both of my sisters have birthdays very close to Halloween. So we went on a ghost tour in the Atlanta area that was led by a psychic medium. And I love ghost tours. I'm like a ghost tour connoisseur.
I love that.
And as much like I've gone on so many, but I would never have experiences. So you'd think, there's, observation bias, confirmation bias. You would think with like as much as I've been like, talk to me, that
you would at least have a one.
Yeah, but like nothing had happened.
Yeah.
I mean, I had just moved out of a house that had a spirit, and we may get into that. But other than that, nothing had really happened. So we went on this ghost tour, and it went around a certain area in Atlanta, and it ended in a graveyard, a very large graveyard. And the guide passed out dowsing rods, but I think hers were just bent coat hangers.
Oh, like, yeah, you can do that. Yep, you can do that.
Yeah. Because she was explaining how it worked, and she modeled it, and of course I was thinking she's
moving them. I thought that too. Whenever I would see people use it, I'm like, okay, I'm not falling for your shit.
Right. Yes, I know. It like the experience, you just gotta experience it. So she had all these sets, and she started passing them out, and like at the time, like I was like, oh no, I'm kind of uncomfortable. What do we do? So she handed them to me and my 2 sisters and everybody. And we were kind of standing at a crossroads in the cemetery because it was very large. And she was like, all right, well, go ask the spirits questions. And she was like, oh, over there is a spirit that really doesn't like women, and he's hurt women on my tour. And we're
Definitely
like,
not going that direction then.
yeah,
Thank
not
you for
exact
warning me that
right.
that's one of the options.
Yes, like that's not exactly my prime interview subject. And then she pointed out, like, over there is where there was an orphan burial ground for the orphanage that ran in the 1800s. And so me and my sisters were just kind of standing there awkwardly, like, all right, what do we do? And she came up to us and she was like, oh, you have two children spirits with you, Jeremiah and Macy. They don't really talk to people very much, but you have kind hearts. And then she was just went off.
I love spooky ladies like that, where they're so used to it that they're like, oh yeah, they're children that never show their face, but they're showing it to you. It must mean you're like really nice. Okay, bye. And you're like, okay, I'm like a little afraid though.
I
Like,
know,
thank
like
you for nothing.
it's so casual for her. Like, it's
Yes,
just
yes,
her
yes.
day to day. So then she was just like off, and we're standing there like, okay, what do we do?
Just standing there with coat hangers talking
Right.
to children.
Yeah. And so we're standing there and it's dark by this point. And I heard there were two young women who had been behind us for much of the tour. And they were sort of diagonally behind me. We're standing there awkwardly. And then the young women who were sort of diagonally behind me, like several feet, I hear one of them say, are there any children here? Oh my God. And I turned, and right as I turned, both of their dowsing rods went boom and
right
shot right over to me and my sisters.
Yep.
So then we all kind of look at each other and we're like, oh. And so they came up to us, and so all five of us were in a circle. They took the lead on questions. And like, I kid you not, like every question they asked, all five of our pairs answered the exact same way at the same time.
All synchronized, which is so creepy, but very cool at the same time.
Yeah. And so they asked, like, I mean, it's been so long. That was 2018, but so I'm rusty on some of the questions, but I think one was like, do you know you're dead? And it was like, they crossed, and it was like, yes. And then it was like, do you want to pass on? And it was like, no.
Oh.
So that was, and then after that, like, it was cold. I had my hands in my coat pocket. My right hand suddenly got really warm, like something was holding my hand.
Oh, that's so also creepy but cute.
It was
creepy
sweet.
cute.
Yeah.
Yes.
And my sister was on that side where her left hand was by my right hand. And I was like, my right hand just got really warm. And she was like, my left hand just got really warm.
Oh, they were holding both of your hands.
Yeah. And it stayed like that until the end. Like, we walked to a certain spot and I felt it just lift and my hand was cold again.
That's so sweet.
I know.
But also a little sad. Oh.
Yeah, I know. So that was my dowsing rod. So when I saw your Carson experience, I was like, I know how that feels. Like, I know it's hard to explain, but when you feel it, you feel them doing that. Like, yeah.
It's wild how that works, but that's a really sweet story. What a cool, like, first/second ghost encounter. Like, because I feel like it sounds like it was your first one with like other people around that could all kind of confirm the same things.
Yes.
And that's honestly why I didn't talk about it. I don't think I've talked about it yet on the podcast. It's mostly just been me posting on Instagram and TikTok, because it was such a weird experience and I was having it by myself and I honestly felt like a little nutty. And so I was like, I cannot be the only one seeing this. And also I would get stuck with like, what should I ask them next kind of thing with Carson. And so I was just like, help, please. And then a bunch of really cool people showed up like you. And so I thought it was really neat how you like had those experiences too, because it's one of those ones where you can actually like show somebody. Like, I don't see ghosts, but I have friends that can, or I know of people that can. I'm a little bit thankful I cannot, because I think I would get a little freaked out. But because you can show someone the answers that they're giving you if they let you, like, because sometimes they've deleted videos from my phone,
I
which is totally fine.
know.
Yes, yes, which I
Wow.
do like it because it does help me, because a couple times I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure? Like, can I post this? Like, what if you change your mind? Like that kind of thing. And like I've noticed that whenever they said it was fine, it was fine. And then if they were kind of iffy on it, I just won't find that video on my phone anymore. I
Wow.
know. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Which like I was reflecting, I've noticed a thread in my experience, and I wonder if it's similar for you as a
Ooh.
storyteller and a writer.
Mm.
The most like wow spiritual experiences I've had have been with spirits that want their story preserved and told.
Oh, I have goosebumps right now. Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yes.
Because I'm like, okay, well, like, I don't mean why me in like a
Self-deprecating.
yes, 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 yes. Like
Yeah.
not like I'm meaning it like only logically. Like
Right.
why? Because like it's one thing, it's like, okay, well, you want to be known or whatever, but like why specifically? And maybe that is what it is. And actually knowing, even though they're not public about, it was very weird um where someone reached out to me and was like, I think this is who they are. And I was like, I don't know, because there was some information that was kind of missing.
Wow.
And but I was talking with them like and writing down answers and stuff off camera that they said was okay, but on camera they would not answer those questions, which is totally
Mm.
totally fine. But I had like their birth date and their area of birth and like the prison they were sentenced to, and like,
Mm.
well, I did say when they were sentenced and stuff like that publicly because they said that was okay. However, there were things like they told me their dead name privately, they told me their birth date
Mm.
privately, things like that. And this person reached out with who they thought they were, and everything matched. And I was kind of like
Wow.
freaking out. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this information. So that's why I made that, like, because people were guessing and trying to find like
Mm.
their life. And the thing that you're saying like about preserving their story is very interesting, because everything I look up about them is about their very traumatic death and nothing else. And I'm just like, can we like get to know them, please? Like, can we like get to know them? And
Yeah.
so that's why I like I tried to take a video without me tearing up, but I was just like, see, now tearing up now. But like, I was
Yeah.
just like, can we like just focus on like them, like,
Right.
and what they were like in this world. And so it was just very like cool to have that experience, but also for people, I actually don't mind if people don't believe if it's true, because that's their own like belief system, and I'm not trying to like convert people or something crazy, but it's just along the lines of like, if you knew what was confirmed, like, I don't know why this is happening or how it is happening, but like it's pretty like self-explanatory that this is like
Mm.
a true thing that's going on. I don't know if it'll happen again. I don't know if this is like, I don't know how to handle the information, honestly, but I'm just like
Right.
kind of taking it day by day with them. Also, Kachu is now here.
Hello, Kachu.
Look at this dude.
Oh, oh wow. Hi. Yeah, and what you're saying about, yeah, like to fixate on the method of death and that trauma
Mm.
like reduces the fullness of Carson's personhood
Yes, yes,
and
exactly.
story.
And I think that's why I was really stumped in the beginning, where they were like, I'm not a human, or I'm only sort of a human. It was definitely that like subhuman thing where they thought of the, first of all, they're very, very queer, like the in
Mm.
life, in death, like they're queer. And so there's also like a lot of oppression around that, of course. And then on top of that, the way they died and the way they were treated and the way their death was
Mm.
reported on and stuff, it was just very, very bad. And so I think that you're right, like it takes away from their personhood. And so I like that. Whenever you said story preservation, I did not mean to go off on this
No, no,
tangent,
no.
but that like really clarified it for me, because I have
Yeah.
been logically wondering, like, I love this like relationship we have, and I think you're a really great friend, and I think you're a lovely ghost, but I was kind of
Yeah.
not understanding like what the end goal was. So thank you for being patient with me while I like delved into
Yep.
that and teared up a
No.
little bit. But it's just a very weird experience, and it's one that you can actually like share with other people, like with the dowsing rods, what like with their answers and things like that.
Yeah.
And what you're saying of like maybe like for what you've experienced, and maybe now because what I'm experiencing, we're both storytellers and authors, and
Yeah.
like maybe that's what the common thread is for that. I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
And don't you, in your work, don't you focus on death and grief and trauma?
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
you're
I'm
like,
a trauma
you're,
therapist. Yeah. So
yeah,
in,
like
in
you're
my day job.
uniquely,
Yeah.
right, like uniquely equipped to enter in. So I just think it's so beautiful.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, so I like that's been my experience.
Mhm.
And I have a couple of stories to go with that. Would you
Mhm.
like to hear them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so and I should say, and I'm not sure if you can relate, but I grew up in a pretty fundamentalist community,
Mm-hmm.
but I was always drawn toward ghosts and the unknown. And so I
Mm-hmm.
always had to kind of suppress that.
Yep.
And as I've gotten out of that, more and more spiritual experiences have
Yep.
happened. And so the very first one, I was still kind of making my way out of that fundamentalism. I mean, I had been pretty far out, but there were
Mm-hmm.
still some like,
No,
oh,
you have, it's a lot to unlearn. I know like people say you have to unlearn, but that is like the best description of it. I don't outright say like what religion it is, because any religion can get
yeah,
radicalized that way and be oppressive
yeah,
that way. However, um, and I don't want people to like kind of fixate on mine, because everyone, like you're saying, like fundamentalists, I know people who are Mormon, like people who are Baptist, and all those things can be really beautiful. And at the same time, we have
yeah,
to like acknowledge that there's like this heavy oppression that happens, and suppression that
yes.
happens, and shame. And so
Oh,
like I
yeah.
feel like when you're saying like even though you work hard to like relearn and unlearn, you will still have moments where, at least I do, where I'm like, oh, this is evil, or this is a sin, or this is XYZ, insert language, religious language here. And it's like, but why do I think that though? Like, is it actually bad,
Hmm.
or was it just like instilled in me that it was bad and it isn't? And so I
Yeah.
hear what you're saying about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So I was always like drawn toward these
Mm-hmm.
things that, you know, then it's like, no, 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 that's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's see. When my son was born,
Mm-hmm.
we moved into an old farmhouse that was built in
Mm-hmm.
1890.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to live in an old house. And
Mm-hmm.
when we first moved in, I was like, is it haunted? And then like, and then I was like, the tug of war of like, yes, be haunted. Wait, no, don't be haunted. That's scary. Like, and then nothing ever happened. We were there, let's see, when 2014 to 2018. So 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
nothing weird happened. But I'm the type of person that like, I move into an old house. It's not just a cool, pretty old house. Like this
Mm-hmm.
is a place where stories happened, where people lived and died. Like this was a place where old Southern wakes happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
could not live in this house and not try to dig up the story.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So, and the person I bought it from didn't know the story. She had revitalized the place physically, but she didn't know the story. So
Mm-hmm.
I like hunted people down, and I
Mm-hmm.
ended up figuring out who built it, their story, their children.
Wow.
We even had a relative of the almost original family come over. She was
Wow.
95.
Wow.
Yeah, and so we had like lunch together, and she told us memories and what like, oh, this room was this and that room was that. And she was so grateful to get to be back in the home again because it was her cousin's home.
You knew what the original like layout looked like and all sorts of cool
y-
stuff.
yeah, so I dug up everybody's story. It was like there were parents that had two daughters and a son, and she said the son died young. And
Mm-hmm.
I felt tender about that, so I didn't ask anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then the two sisters grew old together and died. And then after that, no one lived in the home until
Interesting. That's very interesting though. That's unusual, I feel like.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I dug up all these things, pictures, names, dates, everything. Well, then we got this really sudden opportunity to move up closer to family back to my hometown in North Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was like, boom, 30 days, we're going to be out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when my daughter started talking to a spot in her nursery.
Oh, 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 oh. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh no.
So
But
she
also
and
exciting.
Yeah. And she was a baby. Like she was like 16 months old. She was early talker, but like a baby, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So not going to be making things up.
No.
And my husband works at night a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be just me and my little
Of
ones a
course, it's
lot.
just you alone when these things happen, because that's always how they happen.
I know. And so like one night she was like pushing her little walker and she stopped and looked toward her nursery and she got that look that little toddlers get that are like someone's watching me. And she like
Mm-hmm.
smiled and she
Mm-hmm.
kept saying this word that I didn't know,
Mm-hmm.
mata, mata, until I finally guessed mustache.
Oh, mustache. See, I'm getting goosebumps
Yeah.
again.
And I was like,
Mustache.
but
Oh,
nothing was there. Nothing was
no.
there. And
No.
then so night after night from that point on, I would bring her into her nursery. The first night, I noticed a mist in her nursery, but I attributed it to the wipe warmer.
That
And then,
makes sense. Yeah,
yeah,
I would have done that too.
yeah. And then, like, usually I could just nurse her and she'd fall asleep and I'd lay her in her crib.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but starting at that point, she kept pulling away. And then she was like, hi,
No.
hi, brother, right there.
Oh.
Brother, right. Uh-oh. Fall down?
Oh
What
no.
what happened? This is my mama.
Oh,
And like I was like,
I'd be
oh,
so freaked out.
it happened night after night. And then
Uh-huh.
suddenly I remembered I dug up everybody's story except for
Mhm.
the brother.
Oh.
And I was like, I never learned his story because I was too
Hmm.
nervous to ask.
Yes, because well, first of all, it's a young boy who died, and that's
Yeah.
already sad, and it's hard to poke at that. And second of all, you have a son, which also adds an extra layer of like, I can't touch this right now kind of thing.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So then I was like, uh, in retrospect, I think he like it was like as soon as we knew we were leaving, he's like there trying
Hmm.
like don't forget about me.
Hmm.
So I started digging up, going to like the archives in the local city,
Hmm.
historical society, like
Hmm.
asking people and digging up. And I found his grave. I mean, that wasn't hard to find. He was in the family plot. But
Hmm.
the day we were closing on this house, I was driving up and they called me back, someone who I had asked to help me.
Hmm.
And they were like, we found him, Leah. And it turned out he had died in my daughter's nursery at
Oh.
23 years old
Oh.
of typhoid fever.
Oh no.
Yeah. And after his name and that whole story came out, it
Hmm.
stopped. It didn't
Wow.
happen again.
See?
Yeah.
See? It's a whole thing. I think that is so beautiful.
Yeah.
You were able
So
to do that for him. Hmm.
that was the first like yeah, that was a
Hmm.
big one. That's the main one I think of when people ask.
Hmm.
Then like more have happened as
Since.
well.
Yeah. And it's one of those things too where you're like, of course you need to be a critical thinker and be logical about stuff and like take the world in with a grain of salt and be like, okay, there are other explanations for this.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you can have space for like, I don't like for spirituality and connection with the afterlife as well, because I think mind, body, spirit should all be connected that way.
Hmm.
Whether it's through therapy or through like your own personal experience, like in both at my job and outside of my job, like I feel like that's the case where you need logical brain and emotional brain to connect. You need mind, body, spirit to connect. And I think being open for these spiritual encounters or these spirit encounters is like a really big deal. And I think really important because clearly, like, that spirit needed his story to be told, and he was really worried about being forgotten.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Now he won't be.
Right. Yeah, and I make these books for our family that are like for each year. And so like
Hmm.
it's all written down in like a well-preserved thing and
Hmm.
I think I wrote it out for the people we sold the house to and
Hmm.
um
That's very
yeah.
sweet.
Yeah. And that has I have another story. Let's see. So I have not told this one publicly before.
Mm.
Um but I don't I feel like I should tell it now. And I guess because it's relatable with like the Carson thing.
Hmm.
Um, and you know, these things keep happening where it's like undeniable that like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, these spirits are coming, so they are not forgotten,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's just in a smaller capacity or a larger one.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, my kids and I are in the woods a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say where this was, but it's somewhere that I am very, very frequently. I'm
Mm-hmm.
very, very familiar with this forest. And yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we were out there, um, and I can't say how long ago this was,
Mm-hmm.
but we were out there digging and playing, and I had this weird compulsive thought. And that's where, you know, these sometimes these things that you sense, you would think it's just your imagination
Right.
until it's confirmed.
Right.
And so we were out there and I just kept thinking someone died out here.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept thinking, show me where you are and I'll find you. Like, show me where you are and I'll find you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kept thinking, Leah, you're so weird.
I totally get that because you're just like, why am I being a fucking weirdo out in the woods when I'm just trying to spend time with my children and have a nice day?
Yeah. And like, I just kept thinking that. I
Yeah.
couldn't stop thinking it. 2 weeks later, I was back in that same forest,
Mm-hmm.
and I found human remains.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That,
That's really
yeah,
scary, but you
that,
found them.
yeah.
See, now I'm gonna cry again. I'm so
Oh
sorry, Leah.
gosh, no,
That's so
no.
beautiful. That I mean, horrible.
Um,
That's horrible. But
I know.
it's like they needed you to find them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that I have my own theories
Mm-hmm.
about what transpired
Mm-hmm.
that differs from the official narrative,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because of my familiarity with this forest.
Mm-hmm.
But that was just wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you just knew. And it's something that transcends. I know I sound like such a freaking hippie because I'm like mind, body, spirit, but it
No, you
is
don't.
like your body knows,
Mm-hmm.
your subconscious knows, and spiritually your spirit knows that
Yeah.
someone's there and they need your help, and that's how you were able to find them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that was a very, you know, that was a shorter story than I thought, but very
No, no,
potent.
it is a potent story. It
Yeah.
is. And it's also gonna be shorter because you're being respectful and you're not
Right.
sharing everything.
Yeah.
Because like for instance, like if I would tell like Carson's story in full, it would be longer, but they want like their wishes are different than what's already publicized. And so you have to keep things under wraps and you have to be respectful and not like get in the way of their death, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think that it's a very like powerful short story. Although I'm also really sorry that you had to go through that too, because that's really traumatizing at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely now like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay, but
Mm-hmm.
it definitely has, you know, I constantly think I'm seeing stuff when I'm in the woods.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I
But
still
also
go to the
you
woods.
also might. Yeah, well, that's the other thing too, is like, especially whenever you have like although I have not come across human remains before in the woods, I've known people who have died in the woods, and I've
Mm,
also seen weird like living humans that are obviously like not okay in the woods before too, like while trail riding and stuff like that, like as a kid, all throughout my life, you know, Appalachia is a whole
yeah.
thing. So it's I completely like think you do have to be on your guard sometimes when in the woods too, but then on
Yeah.
top of that you have this unusual and very intense experience, and so of course you're gonna be on
Right.
the lookout for that.
Yeah, for
Mm-hmm.
sure. Yeah. So that was that.
That's really incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know you have unique work you've done as a death doula. What exactly is a death doula, and what would you like us to know about it?
Yeah. So a death doula provides non-medical care and
Mm-hmm.
support for people who are dying and their
Mm-hmm.
caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
So I have been trained in how the body dies,
Mm-hmm.
things that may seem distressing to see, but that are actually normal,
Mm-hmm.
advanced planning,
Mm-hmm.
um, caring for the bot like washing and dressing the body if a caregiver wants to do that after someone has passed, as well as grief support. And yeah, so we are not a replacement for hospice by any means, because hospice is medical care. But we can, a lot of times hospice can only come a couple of hours a week. And so a death doula can be there to provide extra support, because otherwise all of that is coming on a caregiver.
Only on the caregiver. Yep. And if they're alone, or, oh my gosh, like definitely with my work, especially when it comes to like, even though I'm trauma specific, there's a lot of grief that comes with trauma as well.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I just, it is wonderful that you have that as like a service that you provide for people and a skill that you provide for people, because there are you are probably at one of your most vulnerable states when a loved one, or even if you don't love them, but it's a difficult family member, sometimes that actually makes it worse, because you're kind of grieving twice, because you're grieving the person that should have been in your life and you didn't get, and the person that you know who's dying, and
plus
like
caring for them. Absolutely.
Caring for them when that may not have been reciprocated, or even like something worse has been reciprocated, not reciprocated, but given to you or done to you. And so it's just, there's a lot that goes into it. And so I'm very, very thankful for people like you, that like people get taken advantage of during this time. People get, they can't advocate for themselves. They don't know all the options that they have. They have no idea, let alone free thinking of like you're not going to be in a brainstorming session while someone's dying. Like that's just not where your brain is.
Yeah.
So I love that you are a death doula. I think that is so lovely for people.
Yeah, thank you. So that's what I offer to my community. And then I can also offer guidance. Like, we experience other kinds of deaths. So like feeling like you're dying to a past version of yourself. So that's something that I felt called to do. And then as a storyteller, I'm passionate about like legacy projects and things like that.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So that's what I offer to my community in that capacity.
That's really cool, because as a therapist, I'm always like, I'm also first generation American, and so like my past is in or not past, my ties are to the Caribbean, which include specifically Jamaica and Panama, and then also like the white side is Irish. So all of that ties together, where like Irish folks know how to grieve, Black folks and Caribbean folks, they know how to grieve, and like Americans do not. And I'm an American, like, so I'm not like trying to pick on Americans, but in the US, there's not like a culture around, it's very like short and like suppressive and
in a box. And
it's very compartmentalized. Yes, it's in a box. And it's also like bureaucratic too. Like it's like there's like this shame involved, like if you don't get back to work fast enough, or if you can't do something that you used to do, it's like, oh, why am I like this? And it's like, you're grieving. And also like another thing that I love is I'm not even kidding, like word for word, I've talked to my clients about like, but what do you want the legacy to be? Because like you have a relationship with them, whether they believe that it's memories, whether they believe that there's an afterlife, like doesn't matter. Like, well, it does depending on what they decide to do, but like the key factor is that they need to have like a different relationship with this person, and it's shifting in some sort of way. And so they like need that legacy, and like what do you want that to be, especially if it's like, for instance, like their abuser that died, like what do you want the legacy to be? And it's interesting too, because some people are very resistant to that, which I get it, because that's not the culture here. But I love that you even brought up like preservation, legacy. How do you want to remember them? Do you want to make sure you like have the full story? You want to make sure that you acknowledge the good parts, the not good parts about this person and your reaction with this person? And how do you want to honor them in the future, if you do want to honor them in the future? Like, I think all of those things are very important questions to ask. So I love that you offer that service as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And yeah, my dad's family came from Ireland. So when you were saying that about grief, I was like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
there's
the
that
Irish know how to
piece.
grieve. Yeah.
Yeah. And so a lot of, in the community that I am right now, a lot of my work focuses on sort of educating and sort of shifting that
Yes.
that notion of this
Yes.
like compartmentalized boxy grief of
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, how that's not, that's not the lived experience, and how we can make room for
Right.
this more holistic and ever shifting
Yes.
grief.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It can't be tacked together. It's not a checklist situation at that point.
Right.
It's not.
Yeah.
So I really
Absolutely.
do love that you do that. Your work is so, so important. And
Thank
I
you.
didn't even know this was a thing. So I'm so glad I know about it, because I'm totally going to suggest like that clients seek out like death doulas,
Yeah.
or like more, not like, hospice is like a beautiful, super supportive service. It's just that if they need more than that, like
Right.
normalizing it for them, that like it's fine if you need more than that, because like
Yeah.
it they can only do so much medically,
Right.
but emotionally and spiritually you need something as well. So
Yes.
I like that you have that as an option, and that is an option.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
So you have a book that you encapsulated into an audio drama as well,
Hmm.
and there's a really unique take on Appalachia and Celtic history. What drew you to wanting to portray those places and the portal type themes in your work?
Yes, thank you for asking. So the book is called The Innis Forgettance, the
Mm-hmm.
theme being forgetting the past and the
Mm.
the effects, what happens when we don't know our true story. So more
Mm-hmm.
themes of preservation here.
I love that.
Um, so yeah, so I wrote it as a novel. It's uh and it came to me when I was living in that 1890s farmhouse. So
Yes.
that inspired the era, because I was living like, I felt like I had one foot in either timeline,
Yes, you did.
and I would be out in the yard with my toddler son digging and finding these old objects.
Mm.
But it's also, so I live in North Georgia. It's like
Mhm.
I'm like so close to the base of
Oh
Appalachia,
yeah.
like one foot in, one foot out again.
Mm-hmm.
And where I live now, which is where I grew up, it when I was young, it was very rural, and we had
Mm-hmm.
like a little grocery store called Hooper's that we would walk to, and
Mm-hmm.
we would be out in the woods constantly digging and finding all these old objects. There was a
Mm-hmm.
dilapidated old house that I was always curious about.
Mm-hmm.
So I was always trying to dig up the past.
Mm-hmm.
And then my family, we would spend a lot of time in Rabun, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and then we would also be up at Roan Mountain. Are you familiar with Roan Mountain?
I've heard of it, but I'm not familiar with it.
It's in North Carolina, and
Okay.
we would always stop at the Mast General Store, which was like an
Mm.
old-timey style,
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, licorice and barrels of
Oh
marbles,
yes,
and
yes,
like
yes.
very so that era, really stood out to me. And that's where I would be with my cousins every summer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I remember we would hike Roan Mountain, and I would just see the fog snaking around the trees, and it's just so spooky.
Mm-hmm.
And then my mom had a collection of the Foxfire books, and I was always drawn toward them. And then I would open them and be like, well, this is way above my reading level.
Yeah. They look so cool though.
I know. And my mom would do things like taffy polls with us, and
Cool.
because she really loved that. Um, she still does. And so I think those childhood experiences, and then living in that house, sort of kind of awakened.
Mm-hmm.
um, it just kind of really put me back in that time, something about that time.
Mm-hmm.
But the way it came to me was I was rocking my son when he was an infant.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going through postpartum depression,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't realize that's what it was, but that's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard, I don't know if this happens to you, but I just heard this character. I wasn't trying to think of what to write.
Mm-hmm.
I heard this character say, Mama's crying sickness is not my fault.
Oh,
And I was
yeah,
like, whoa, what was that? And that was the
yeah.
first thing.
It's
And
the seed
then,
of the book.
Yeah. And that's the first line, and it's never
Oh,
changed.
yes. And whenever you said it, I was like, oh, I heard this. I
Yeah.
heard this line. That's
Yeah.
so beautiful.
And then there was another time that, and this came from the Celtic storyline of the book, where again, I was rocking one of my children and I heard, "You have everything you need inside of you, but much of it is locked away. This
Mm.
was why we saw the locksmith."
Oh, wow.
And so those were like how it came to be.
Yes.
And that's how this story of this cursed town in an alternate Appalachia,
Uh-huh.
like there's spirits that haunt the woods that manifest as floating lights, and they can steal your
Mm.
soul if you don't carry a light with you after dark.
That's very
Um,
cool.
but they don't know why they're cursed because they don't know their past.
Okay.
Yeah. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
That
So,
that totally I can like I'm sorry, I'm like having
no,
a
you're
good
good.
reaction, but like a reaction to it because sometimes this is very theatrical, so bear with me, but it's
I
fine.
love
You're an author
theatrical.
too. And yeah, you're right. You're a narrator. What am I talking about? You're a voice actor. So like there will be times where I think like there's that kind of like that pop in thought, automatic thought kind of thing that pops up that's like I work with haunted people because I do.
Mhm.
And then the trauma work that we do makes them not haunted anymore. You
Ooh,
know what I mean? But I
yeah.
haven't like I have not shared that other than like right now because I'm just
Wow.
like because I felt like I was being basically a dick because I was like, "Oh, I'm healing you," because that's not they're the one doing the work.
Mm,
But I'm there with them uncovering stuff and digging into stuff with them so they don't
yeah.
have to do it by themselves. And it sounds like that's what the themes of your book are about too.
Yeah, yeah. So
Mhm.
the one of the protagonists is 17-year-old Porter Hollis, and
Mhm.
he's been blamed for his mother's crying sickness because it
Mhm.
started with his birth.
Ah,
And so he
yes.
cannot, like, he can't handle it anymore. He's got to figure out how to heal his mother, and like,
Mhm.
why is this happening to me and us?
Mhm.
And he sets out and ends up discovering what no one has known.
Wow.
And so the reason it became an audio drama is because of the next story that I'm planning to write, which I felt needed to be a podcast. And I was like,
Mhm.
well, I'll just experiment on my
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
Um, and then it was just really fun because I did some acting in my younger years, but I hadn't done it in a really long time.
Mhm.
And so like it was just really fun to like get to dive into all these different accents and like
Mhm.
use this mesh of like Southern and
Mhm.
Appalachian and dive into all these different characters. And I was
Mhm.
like, oh, but I didn't know, I started it without really, I didn't think about all the characters. So
Uh-huh.
I would get to
True
different,
author.
uh, I would get to different points. I'm like, oh my God, I forgot about you. How am I going to do your voice? So
Why do
that
you have to be a unique human being that I created?
I know, yes. And so that I finally finished the last of like that's project finished and it's there for everybody to listen to in June. And I am so tired, Iona.
Mm.
Like,
Your work is just so compelling, so
thank
interesting. You're
you.
so intentional with your themes. I love it so, so much. Um, and so I'm like so thankful for your time because you are a wonderful storyteller and you're very knowledgeable and very like just a courageous person. And I'm really
Thank
glad I got to
you.
like talk and meet you to you, talk and meet
Gosh.
to you, meet you and talk to you.
We're both so tired.
We are
Um,
both very tired.
Thank you for sharing your time with me. Like, I'm so grateful to connect with you. You are so wonderful and warm, and the way you entered in with Carson is just so beautiful and inspiring.
Thank you very, very
Yeah.
much. But I appreciate everything you've discussed and like for lending some of your expertise. And it was just really, really fascinating. I'm going to include Leah's information in the show notes below, but why don't you let us know where we can find you and all your work?
Yes. So my website is leah-noel.com.
Mm-hmm.
That's where my writing, astrology readings, and death doula offerings are all there. On Instagram, I'm mainly active on Instagram these days, and my
Same.
handle is leah.with.a.pen. So
I
Leah,
love that.
Leah with a pen with dots in between each word. I was on TikTok. I've kind of been on a break.
That's completely understandable and fair.
Yeah. And so my first book was While Cerberus Sleeps. That's a dystopian philosophical book. And then the Innis Forgettance is the novel and the podcast. And that's streaming on all the places. Yeah.
That's wonderful. So to you, Spooky Soul, who's listening, make sure you check that out.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm really thankful I got to talk to you.
You too. Let's stay in touch.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks to all you spooky souls out there for listening to Creepy Core and Folklore. Follow on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok if you're looking for more uncanny content. If you have your own tales to tell, you can email creepycoreandfolklore@gmail.com. If you liked this, please leave a review wherever you get your podcasts, or tell a friend who might enjoy these stories to spread the word. If you're interested in dark fantasy, check out my Hollowverse series. Ashes is available now in paperback and ebook on Amazon and audiobook on Audible, and the sequel is underway. I'm Iona Wayland, and I'll see you next time.